A very warm welcome to our panelists. I think we are holding everyone back from lunch break, so let's make it very exciting and interesting. So we've seen that a lot has happened in the edtech space, especially post-COVID-19. There's been a huge acceleration, but that comes along with a huge plethora of challenges as well, right? Regulatory, legal. So today's aim is to discuss some of these challenges. How can edtech companies and educational institutes work with regulatory bodies to deal with these concerns? So let's take our audience through a journey of especially first, and I'd love to hear all my speakers here, how has the regulatory environment spearheaded the growth of the edtech sector in India specifically, and especially post-COVID-19? So let's go with Prateek. Let's start with you first.
Thank you, Yasmin, for inviting us here. So one thing is so there has been a lot of persona changed in terms of students, in terms of teachers, schools, parents, post-COVID. But in terms of regulatory, there is no major change. Like there's a new education policy which are coming up. Which I don't see any challenge for edtech. It's moreover like an opportunity for edtech. The higher ed is changing at a very rapid pace. The new education policies, giving a different dimension to the entire sector. But in terms of persona post-COVID, everything have become phygital, like physical plus digital. And so does we adopted to this change as well and diversified ourselves in physical learning centers as well. And I would say online adoption have increased a lot. The mentality of teachers, students, parents have changed a lot. And online is now fairly accepted as a means of study. We have seen 100% growth in our online learners year on year, post-COVID as well. So these are some macro changes which I observed. And in terms of regulatory, government is opening up. Now, higher ed is changing at a very rapid pace. National Digital University is planned. National Higher Education Commission is planned. And NEP implementation is happening all across sectors, be it school sectors, be it higher ed sector. So I do see a great opportunity in terms of working with government, in PPP models, and working for governments to solve for their metrics, their targets. So I do believe a lot of government and public partnerships will happen in next tenure of the government.
Thanks, Prateek. I think I totally agree with you that the whole persona and how we perceive the whole education sector has gone through a complete revamp since COVID-19. How we looked at education in the traditional way has changed. Smita, I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially how has this regulatory environment impacted, the edtech sector according to you?
Yeah. I think Prateek started quite well. We as both users and as an industry are really moving fast at a rapid pace. And the unfortunate thing is that the regulation is not. So regulation has to significantly catch up. And what I mean by that is, and I think NEP and NCF was a good step in that direction, but unfortunately when it came out, and even till today, it is a document, it has not really been implemented well. We all hope that it will get implemented. But yeah, I think it's basically the regulation needs to catch up. The regulation needs to be more in sync with how educational institutions need to run today. How edtech and the industry outside can support institutions, support students outside of school. And I think it'll only enable the ecosystem if they do. So a simple example I'll give you is, we still, in India, the intent of the government was to subsidize education, right? And that's why things like service tax and GST were never applied to schools and college institutions if you're delivering core curriculum. We still have no GST regime only for textbooks. But all of us know that learning doesn't happen with textbooks. Learning is multimodal. It happens with multiple devices and multiple opportunities, learning opportunities. But we don't have that regulation enabler, right? So still the parents and the schools have to spend extra money if they want to invest in technology in the classroom, if they want technology solutions, if they want to partner with people like us. So I think these are very archaic regulations. I think it's important to move forward. I was really hoping that there'll be some government officials in the audience today. I learned, of course, it's mostly entrepreneurs and
Yeah.
investors. So yeah, so
Interesting, yeah. I think
more is needed.
Yeah, more catching up to do when it comes to regulation. Hari, I'd love to hear your views. What key concerns are you seeing, especially in the regulatory framework for EdTech sector overall?
First of all, thank you. Thanks, Yasmin. Thank you for everyone here. Just as Prateek and Smita mentioned, post-COVID, what's happened is that the adoption of online learning has increased multifolds across sectors, right? When we usually think of EdTech, we only think of, let's say, K-12 or school education going online. But for example, Great Learning is a company that completely focuses on professional upskilling and higher education. And there itself, the kind of growth that us and all others in the space are having is phenomenal. Now, and obviously nobody expected this kind of growth to happen, the least of it, the regulators. So I think what is really needed is a framework of guidelines, more than, let's say, diktats and rules, a set of guidelines in terms of how to operate, what to communicate, what not to communicate, what are the acceptable rules, do's and don'ts. I think that will essentially give more confidence to the consumer, the learner, and also bring everybody, everybody then knows the rules of the game, right? When I say everybody, I mean every single EdTech company operating in that space knows the rules of the game, what are the, boundaries that you have to stick to and what you cannot, let's say, cross. I think that will make it easier and better for everybody to operate in.
That actually ties into my next question here. So how do you think can companies like yours, like tech companies, can work with regulatory bodies to create these frameworks, create these regulations that are help and address these concerns and drive more innovation in the sector?
Let me just take that. So there are a few initiatives we've done. So for example, all EdTech or most of the EdTech companies are part of a self-regulating body called IEC, India Education Consortium. So this is where all EdTech companies have come together, and they've now kind of put out a set of guidelines that, okay, these are basically the rules that all of us abide by, so that there's no confusion in the market, right? So that is something that we're doing. And when it comes to customer grievances, again, there are IEC hearings. It's headed by a retired Supreme Court judge, right? And there's arbitration, all of that happens, right? So that is one initiative that we've done, right? The other bit is, from time to time, the regulators and the governments very graciously invite us for discussions. We are still waiting to see what comes out of those discussions.
Okay. Smita, I heard you also say earlier, I hope some government bodies are hearing. So how do you think can this collaboration actually come to fruition?
Yeah, see, recently, and Prateek was also there, I think a few weeks back, maybe last month, there was this great initiative that was taken actually by the government, and I was very positively surprised with the opportunity where the Commerce Ministry, so the Honorable Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, actually invited Unicorn founders for a closed-door meeting, and it was a very open, candid discussion on what can we do to create a more enabling environment for different businesses. And of course, those conversations were candid also because the government could, or he and his team could very clearly share with us what are their expectations from us. And that is exactly how a partnership works. I think we need more of those opportunities. And, apart from education, the only other thing that I'm very passionate about is climate. And hence, I've followed what India has done on the green energy side. And I think the way, Mr. Piyush Goyal's team sort of collaborated with the private sector, came up with schemes and enablers that helped India move much forward at, in a very fast pace in the clean energy space. And private sector actually enabled it. I think we need something like that with education. And we need something like that with EdTech because, it's also that EdTech is a very broad spectrum. Unfortunately, and I've always given that feedback to ET, that unfortunately EdTech has been seen synonymous to online B2C learning. But it is much, much more than that. I mean, if you look at the developed economies, some of the biggest listed companies are actually institutional B2B edtech providers. So edtech is much broader. It covers learners from K to 12 and then higher education, both formal learning in schools, colleges, universities, and outside. And over here you see three of us who are working in very different spaces. So we also need to understand that it's much bigger, and hence we need to have the right engagement with the right bodies to come up with common solutions. And I think the biggest example is government has written a document of NCF, but it cannot be brought to life without partnering with the public sector companies like us, private sector companies like us, because we know how innovation can be done at a very fast pace. Government is not an operator, not a great operator. They're great regulators. So they should play to their strength. Let us play to our strength.
Yeah, so it cannot be a one-way street. And I think Prateek also mentioned that earlier, that it has to be a partnership, a public-private. The voice has to be from the industry also, the voice, and then the regulations have to be made in consonance with both sides. So Prateek, I'd love to hear what better can we do to create this partnership between government bodies, educational institutes, edtech companies, since as Smita's very rightly said, it's such a vast industry today.
I'll first come to your previous question where, whether we are talking to the government, none of us are talking to the government. It is very difficult to talk to the government. Why? Because education is a state list as well as a central list as well. If I have to talk to government, I have to talk to 28 governments parallelly. I have to have a very big B2G team out there. It is not possible. And within state, within center also, education is very fragmented. There's a minority department, there's a welfare department, there's a minority minister, education minister, schools. There are central schools which are led by central government. There are state government laws. So that even makes even more difficult to work with government and have a one common platform and solution. IC is there, but how many state governments we talk to? Hardly one or two. Because it's a fairly new body. I'm part of that. We should have something sort of Digital India Corporation where where the idea is how we can bring the new age technology and enable masses of India. There is something sort of body government should form, and there has to be some single window of talks where we can put our voice and that navigates throughout the India. As EdTech, we are working in 98% of pin codes of India. So we are the national company. But while talking to the government, it is very, 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 very difficult task. That makes even more difficult to work with government. Yeah.
How do we open these channels? Anyone from the panel? When I see there's so much of, the channels are multiple. How do you make way through this maze? As we said, is there any way that can be better? How better can government involve you? Is it just through conversations? As you said, can technology be a part of it? What other suggestions can we have for making this work, for this partnership to fly?
See, we have to learn from how, infrastructure have developed in India, how highways have progressed in India. There are special purpose vehicles which formed, there are public-private partnerships which have been done in that sector, because no way government can achieve that infrastructure requirement. There has to be a private player who will do highway work for us, and now we have, come a long way in that sector. That can be a good starting point, some special purpose vehicles to be formed with private bodies, and a lot of us works in different states, like Smita works with affordable private schools of India and government schools of India. We work across test prep categories, almost all test prep categories. We made education affordable at our end, and a bit of pieces we have worked with Karnataka government and trying with UP government as well. But technology is the way forward. 70% of the India goes to government schools. And we all know about that. What are the conditions of government schools? Myself studied from a government school, and I know that, a lot to be done there in terms of infrastructure, in terms of content, academic quality. So one good starting point is like, we should learn from how the
Other
infrastructure
industries, yeah.
have evolved in India.
Thank you. Yeah. Smita, you want to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, and we're trying that, right? Where have dialogues and a forum for engagement, productive engagement at the senior level. I feel that if we want the mindset towards education to shift, and not be stuck in the world of textbooks. And I'll tell you why I say that, and I say it very passionately because I don't know how many people are aware that still there are multiple states in the country who mandate that every school has to use their state board published textbooks. Just imagine, I don't know how many parents are there in this room. I definitely don't want my child to learn from a state board textbook which has not changed or upgraded itself in the last 10 years. We don't want to beat down the quality of education, right? So I think for this conversation for change has to happen at the top, really, really at the top. And what we are trying to do at least is, make that voice heard at the senior levels of the government to say, if we as a nation have a vision to be a developed country by 2047, well, guess what? We can't get there without our human capital being top-notch in the world. And for that vision, we all want to participate. We are all proud Indians. I think all of us are doing what we're doing in education because we want a different future for our kids here in India. So I think that's the path. It's a tougher path, but I think it requires all of us to sort of do that. Going to every state government, going to every office is, as you rightly
There has to be
said.
a unified central approach is what I hear
yeah.
from you. There has to be one contact, one body, one that you can deal with. You don't have to go to
And
multiple.
somehow speak to the PMO and speak to the
Yeah.
education minister.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're trying, right?
Yeah.
Not succeeding yet, but trying.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll work. Hari, your thoughts around this, please.
I think honestly it comes down to a question of prioritization, right? NHAI got built and highways got built because it was a priority, right?
great
And,
point.
and it was clearly seen that highways are important for GDP growth in the country, and everything flew from there, right? When it comes to education, unfortunately, for all the talk that happens, I don't think it is looked at with that same importance and prioritization, right? Unless and until that mindset changes, we won't see, I mean, everything that both Smita and Prateek have spoken are fantastic, but it has to happen with the mindset change right at the top that this is extremely important, right? I mean, almost in every similar conference, you would hear that India's gross education ratio, GER, which is right now somewhere in the 20s, has to go up to like 42, 43% for us to be even competitive at the global stage. All of that is not going to happen unless and until we embrace technology in education and give access of good quality education to many, many more students and learners than what we are doing today. I think the issue here is that today Ministry of Education and all its departments primarily act as a regulator, which is basically to ensure that nothing wrong happens, which is fine, which is good. But for the country to grow, they also have to act as an enabler, right? And that mindset and that change is yet to happen.
That's a great point. I think, yes, you can be a regulator, but also be an enabler. Also for a country like India, which has the largest youth population in the world, if we do not work and do not prioritize this, as said, just like we prioritize highways and other infrastructural growth, it's not going to help. We want to become the national global skill capital of the world, right? That's one of our missions for this year. I think it won't work unless this gets taken care of. So thanks for sharing that. Coming to another interesting point here is the increased focus on data privacy, compliance, data protection, and how are Indian edtech companies now ensuring compliance with these regulations, especially with the Personal Data Protection Bill? Anyone would like to take this first? Yeah, Prateek, please.
So we operate in a very different segment, so we don't have consumers, we have students, and the data we have is academic data. And I'm not sure how does government sees it as a personal or not personal, but a teacher should have academic data points of the students, and we should have a right to store that data for a longer duration of time. Still this, there's a lot of gray area about that bill, and it's coming, and we have to comply it. We will comply it digitally. But like, consumers and students are two very different spectrum of things. Like, especially when we talk about K-12 kids and the college kids where we operate maximum, uh, we have to maintain academic quality track record. Like, then only we will be able to recommend them, guide them in their career path. So let's see how this thing shapes up, and we are, like, as things progress, we will put our viewpoint also to government about DPTP bill.
Yes, Madam.
Yeah. See, I think the intent of the policy and of course the Information Technology Act also are all in the right place. I mean, essentially what they're saying is be responsible about the data. It is especially very, very important in our segment because we are dealing with data of students. Our consumers are children who are not making the decision about a lot of things. So there is, of course, a higher responsibility we all carry as organizations to ensure that, we are doing what is right for the child, at the right age. Like, for example, marketing directly to a child who's really young is not the right thing to do because they're just not going to be
And it
making
is
that
happening.
decision. Right, so yeah, so I think, see, regulators are like referees, when you're playing a sport, they're like a referee, right? They're just basically telling you that, hey, play a fair game. And I think that is a very important role they play. And the good thing is that the policy is very much in that direction. I think all companies who are building EdTech for the right reasons, which is, in my mind, the right reason is student outcome improvement. If you're doing that, as an educator, or as a teacher, what data needs to stay private and what does not. Right? Like, for example, we used to have these, when we grew up, at least when I was in school, we used to have ranking boards, right? Top rank and first rank and second rank and third rank. Well, it never helped any child. Never helped any child. I mean, it only made some kids feel they're superstars, and most kids felt terrible about it. And that is very bad data standard in my mind. I think what is relevant data is, hey, how did you do last time, and how are you doing now? So I think, again, this is also one space I feel the regulation needs to catch up. But it's all moving in the right direction. I think as organizations, we must ensure that we do what is right for children, even if the policy doesn't say it, and stay honest to the purpose that we all have set up our organizations for.
Great, thanks, Madam. Also, coming to my final question, how do you have anything to add on the whole personal data protection bill, and how can we?
I think, as Smita said, I think the bill is drafted with the right intent. When it comes to edtech, companies in general, actually we don't capture that much data, apart from academic data and learning data, which is of course critical for getting learners to get those outcomes, right? Beyond that, edtechs are not capturing a lot of data apart from contact information, which I'm sure all edtech companies have the policy that at any point in time, if you want to opt out, you opt out, right? I think everybody follows that.
Thanks for that. Coming to a final question, how do you see the future of the regulatory landscape evolve, especially for the edtech industry, and what implications will this have for the sector's growth and innovation? So, Smita, lady first this time.
See, I think the common thing you've been hearing from us is there is a lot of catch-up that needs to happen, right? So a lot of the way regulators are thinking in the edtech space are input regulations. Do this, don't do this. Whereas, what Hari, for example, was saying, are enabling regulations, not only for the industry, but also for the consumer, are output regulations. Like saying, okay, here is the outcome benchmark we want you guys to hit. Here is how we will rate schools, for example, based on student outcome achievement. And you can't get there unless you do it the right way, right? So I think, ideally, that should be the future. NEP and NCF was written with that intent. So I think it's great intent put out there. But there is just a lot of political pull and push around it. There are state governments who've said, oh, NCF is junk, we're never going to follow it, and which is just crazy because, we should. So I think there is still a lot to happen. And I'm hoping that the way we're seeing other industries, for example, fintech, or we're seeing, I mentioned renewable energy space, the way some of these things are moving forward, like, or things have moved in these industries, I'm really hoping that the same happens for EdTech, because it will be good for parents, for educators, and also for the EdTech companies.
Great, thanks. Prateek, what would you like to say?
I'm very optimistic about future, especially especially how regulatory space in India is shaping up, and there are a lot of changes happening at a regulation level, but would like to see how this NEP implements in schools, in colleges, in actually in the field, and I believe there will be a lot many public-private partnerships will happen in future. And as Smita said, government may listen to us and give a waiver on GST. There will be a lot many online degrees will come up, which will improve gross enrollment ratio of country. And there will be a lot more engaging content in government schools, the PMC schools have come up. And government have increased the budget for those schools as well in this budget as well. So the signs are very good, and there will be lot many private players which will contribute to the vision of government. We wish we will contribute to that, and I am very optimistic about overall landscape. Yeah.
Thank you. Hari, your final words.
So I think the first kind of evolution, or the first step in that evolution, would be the government understanding that EdTech companies and the regulators can work together for achieving the outcomes that the government has set for itself as far as human capital is concerned, right? So it has to move away from this us versus them, mentality, and how do we all work together to achieve something that is more meaningful. If there's one wish that I could make, it would be that just implement NEP. As you put it out in that document, I think it's a policy, it's a very progressive, very forward-looking policy, especially from where we are coming.
It is.
It is just about implementation, and just make sure that implementation happens as has been envisaged in that document, right? I think us doing that itself will bring a huge shift in terms of what, technology-enabled education can achieve. And from there on, we will have new learnings, as in the entire sector will have new learnings, and will continue to evolve.
Lovely thought. I think what I hear from us panelists here, and and you represent the large voice of the entire EdTech center. What we're looking for is empowerment. We're looking for enablement. While regulatory landscape is something you support entirely, you want to be a voice in that. You just don't want it to be, pushed onto you. It has to be something, a collaborative effort. So a partnership there. So let's be optimistic. Let's hope the right people hear this and give us that voice and the seat at the table when it's required. So thank you, panelists. It was a wonderful discussion. Any questions in the audience? Okay, I can only see a hands up, 2 hands up there. So just quickly, if you introduce yourself and pose your questions, sir.
Hi, very interesting discussion there. I'm Puneet Agrawal. I'm a deep learning scientist and an entrepreneur. I've started seeing a teacher in ChatGPT already. So far it explains via text. Soon it will start explaining via illustrations. Coming back to the topic of regulations, such personalized book on demand, on the fly, can disrupt the EdTech industry. How do you guys, distinguished panelists on this, foresee the impact on regulations or the industry at large?
Is the question clear? Yeah.
So, we also believe the same. It can disrupt and enable the entire sector. We have recently launched Alak AI, which is one of the most powerful teacher assistant, I would say. But whether it will replace a teacher, I really doubt, because that's like replacing parents from our life, so that is slightly difficult. But it will enable a lot of teachers out there, and it will and machine actually don't don't get tired. So and it will enable a lot of learning in students. So that is what.
I'll just add that learning is a very social activity. Human beings have to interact with each other. There are some parts of learning that can be done without interaction, right? Which is, I have a doubt, I have a question, I want to know some facts and information. It's great that we have these tools now because, as Prateek said, I think they power people. I think it's it's at every age when new technology comes now, people are like, oh, will it replace teachers? And we don't have to be fearful of this. I think the teacher's role changes. She does not have to just sit and give factual answers to children, and they can figure it out themselves. She has to do the role that she or he will play in a classroom of getting kids to figure out how to get along, how to be open to multiple perspectives, how to engage in a dialogue and work with peers. And I think that's a very, very significant part of learning, and hence, I don't see any challenges here.
Absolutely, thanks. Yes, Hari.
Sorry, just one thought. I'm a firm believer that teachers should never get replaced because, great education cannot happen unless and until you have good teachers, right? Technology, AI, everything else is an enabler in that effect. But what we can achieve using AI, using technology, and I think that is what every single company is trying to work towards, is how do you improve or increase the access of that teacher? So today, if a teacher caters to 100 learners, right? Using technology, can you make that same teacher now cater to 1,000 and 10,000 learners without affecting the quality of teaching, right? And that is what we all have to work towards.
Great points. Thank you. I hope that answered. Final question from Man here. Okay, we can take 2-3 more questions. Okay, great.
Hello, ma'am. My question is to you. You said कि ranking, according to my opinion, ranking means to give the recognition of the hard work of the toppers and motivation for the others.
See, ranking actually, and there is a lot of research behind what I'm sharing, ranking only makes you feel better than maybe another child. But that's not the long game, right? I think the long game for humanity is for all of us to be a better version of ourselves. And let's say if we say that, hey, here is the finish line, at least at the end of a grade. Here is a finish line I set saying that, all of us want to get there because it will be a great place. So let's take a simple example. I want my grade 3 students to be, fluent with reading and comprehending on their own. All kids can get there. The moment we put ranking, we are actually sending a signal to children that you have to win versus someone else. And I don't think that helps because ultimately real life is not winning versus someone else. I mean, Prateek is here and I'm here and, Hari is here. And have we thought as a unicorn, oh, I have to win against someone else? No, I don't have to. We're solving a problem and we are trying to also build an organization or a company that will make money for a lot of people. And we have to just win against the challenges that we are seeing. So ranking actually does not help children at all. In fact, the most progressive schools in the world and even in India do not issue student rankings. They say, you are at 95, 96%, great, get into a great college. And that I think is a great outcome versus ranking.
Great point, thanks. Any other, anyone wants to add on to that? No? Okay, good. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, right there in the middle, please.
Hi, I'm Atul from Right Tracks. So we are in the business of skilling, building the capabilities of the people and all the stuff. I have 2 questions to you people, especially since you were talking about tech, in terms of technology, new dimensions which is there. India is a country of have and have-nots. Now, EdTech has always focused on the haves part which is there. There's still a large chunk which are have-nots. So again, there's a tier 3, down the villages, how are you going to, and we keep on talking about we have a demographic dividend. But there's still a lot, many things has to happen. We need to be seen as a developed country by 2047, which is there. That's one part which is there. How you people are going to really, that's a challenge area. The second is the concept of we have an employment, we're going to keep on generating the employment which is there. Is there any issue in terms of how you're going to upskill the people? We are being seen as if we could be a skill capital for the entire world. But what sort of skill capital we are talking about? Are we able to build those sort of ability amongst our people so that they have a sustained jobs for next 20 years, 25 years? We build at BPOs. What happened to these BPOs? After 5-6 years, they also go for a certain burnouts. Can we target those sort of audience? So though great, I think Hari would be building on those sort of certificate courses, some sort of online tools, you can have a degree, but okay, still a large chunk, it still gets left out. So I think that's a two-part which there. If any one of you, Smita, Hari, or Pratik would like to talk about.
Okay, sir. So for the first question, you'll be very happy to know that at least the two of us sitting here are very, very focused only on the low-income and affordable segment. LEAD, for example, works with, I think, around 8,000-9,000 schools now. I think we have maybe around 9,000 schools in the deepest of rural areas in the country. So the beauty of EdTech, and Pratik can speak about physics for that, that's exactly what they do. I think the genesis of our companies is this lack of equity in opportunity that exists for children, and that's what we're trying to break. Because you're absolutely right that the largest segment of children are in that, in the small towns. I'll just share some data. K-12, 270 million children, school-going children in our country. If they had to be a country by themselves, they would be the 5th largest country in the world. It's a very telling data. It's the largest children population. The next 5 countries, including China put together, is not equal to Indian children. And out of that, maybe 6-7 million children are in the affluent families who are going to great schools in metro cities. The rest are not. And that's the segment we are all trying to serve. So you're absolutely right. I think there is still a lot of work for us to do. On the second point that you mentioned, you're absolutely right too, that skilling is most important. See, because when we say we're getting children ready for employment, I mean, we don't know what jobs are going to be like, 10 years from now. I mean, if I have a child who gets admitted into one of my schools at age 3, she's going to graduate out 13 years later, and then go to college and then another 5 years. I can't predict. So the only thing that we can focus on are core skills like deep conceptual clarity in whatever area of subject they're working on, thinking skills, independent thinking skills. So they're not just sort of ratting out what they are hearing the teacher say. Communication skills, collaboration skills. I think these are the common skills that we all need to build amongst children at every stage of their life.
I'll quickly respond.
Yeah,
I think
sure,
we're short of time, but let me just quickly respond. So, post-COVID, there is a very telling statistic that we've seen at Great Learning. So pre-COVID, you could say about 80 to 85% of our learners for our certificate programs used to be from the top 6-7 cities in the country. Post-COVID, in the last 2.5 years, only about 55% of our learners are from the top, let's say 4 or 5 cities in the country, right? Rest are all, like about 45% are from beyond the top 5-6 cities in the country. So that is one. So essentially what that means is that the need or the awareness of upskilling and people beyond the top 5 cities also understanding how important and critical it is for them to upskill. That is one. The other bit that at Great Learning that we did, this happened during COVID and we continue to do it, is that we launched something known as Great Learning Academy, which essentially is all the skills where we have courses and we put out free content. Right, so anybody can come, and actually we did it because we saw a lot of college students coming to our websites at Great Learning and trying to, but of course they could not afford the programs that we had. This was during COVID, but they wanted to upskill. So that's how, we broke down the content, and today we have about 9,000 courses in Great Learning Academy, all of it free. And till this date, there are, I think, about 5.5 million learners who subscribed to courses through Great Learning Academy, right? So I'm sure every company understands this, does this. It has to be a balance between, how do we spread that reach more and more, and at the same time, a business also needs to get built.
Yeah. Balance between what you do for business and what you do for the good. So that's it. So thank you so much, panelists. It was a very, very insightful discussion. So much to learn from all three of you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. On that note, over to you, Shah.